So, hi, folks. This is ICUJP for Friday morning, July 19th. And I'm Rick. I'm the communications and social media person for the group. And we are very honored to have you here, not only on our Zoom presence, but if you're watching this on YouTube at a future time, we're glad to have you there too. We can actually give you some information here on ICUJP. There's a link here for the link tree um, about the organization, so you can get a link directly to our website. The event that we're going to have the Sunday after next that we're going to be talking to you about. Also, some things that we've done around recently around Palestine, ways that you can donate, things that some of our speakers have either written or produced, and things that some of the ICUJP members have been on as far as news programs or current affairs or anything like that. So I'd encourage you all to copy that link and also take a look at the donation pages. There's one that you can do a monthly donation. There's also another one on Eventbrite where you can do PayPal, Google, or Apple Wallet. Any of those are very, very welcomed. And just bear in mind, as we do more stuff outside in the community, there are costs incurred in that, whether it be printing or things like refreshments and food or anything like that. It can add up pretty quickly. So anything that you could help out with would be wonderful. We usually do a reflection that somebody has written with our group, and this week it's Rebecca Arvizu. So if you are you ready, or are you wrestling cats or?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm contemplating going to the Chicago DNC next month with Code Pink. And simultaneously, I have been trying to keep alive the legacy of the late California Senator Tom Hayden and his monumental legislation known as the Hayden Act, which was co-authored with Senator Tom McClintock in the golden age when Democrats and Republicans actually reached across the aisle. The Hayden Act has saved the lives of over 1 million animals who had the misfortune of being in California's so-called shelters. So I'm going to read the Tom Hayden and Abby Hoffman statements made on February 18, 1970, from the court transcript in the book Conspiracy in the Streets by John Wehner, after they were found guilty for crossing state lines to incite a riot at the 1968 Democrat Convention. Tom Hayden, he made these statements after they were found guilty. So our intention in coming to Chicago was not to incite a riot. Our intention in coming to Chicago was to see that certain things, that is the right of every human being, the right to assemble, the right to protest, can be carried out even where the government chooses to suspend those rights. It was because we chose to exercise those rights in Chicago in the jaws of a police state that we are here today. We would hardly be notorious characters if they had left us alone in the streets of Chicago last year. It would have been a few thousand people. It would have been testimony to our failure as organizers. But instead, we became the architects, the masterminds, and the geniuses of a conspiracy to overthrow the government. We were invented. We were chosen by the government to serve as scapegoats for all that they wanted to prevent happening in the 1970s. It is all right to let mafia people out on bail. It's all right to let murderers out on bail. They walked right out of the courtroom. It is not going to be all right to let us out on bail because they will say there is an incendiary situation. If you didn't want to make us martyrs, why did you do it? If you wanted to keep it cool, why didn't you give us a permit? if you had given us a permit, if you had given slightly different instructions, very little would have happened last year in Chicago. Ramsey Clark knows it. He survived many more street confrontations than most people in this room, no matter how much you want to call him an intellectual from Washington. And then Abby Hoffman's statement was, right from the beginning of the indictment up until the end of the trial, I always wanted to change my plea. I had just like a great urge to confess, say, I am guilty, because I felt what the state was calling me was an enemy of the state, and I am an enemy of the state. I am an enemy of the America that is now with a K. He says we are un-American. I don't feel un-American. I feel very American. I said it is not that the yippies hate America. It is that they feel the American dream has been betrayed. That has been my attitude. Abby points to a portrait of founding fathers on the wall behind the judge and says, I know those guys on the wall. I know them better than you. I feel I know Adams. I mean, I know all the Adams. They grew up 20 miles from my house in Massachusetts. I played with Sam Adams on the Concord Bridge. I was there when Paul Revere rode right up on his motorcycle and said, the pigs are coming, the pigs are coming, right into Lexington. Thomas Jefferson called for revolution every 10 years. He had an agrarian reform program that made Mao Zedong look like a liberal. I know him. Washington, I now respect Bobby Seale's opinion of him as a slaveholder because he was. All men are children of their times, even revolutionaries. We are children of our times and we are not perfect. Washington grew pot. He called it hemp. It was called hemp then. He was probably a pothead. Abraham Lincoln, there's another one. In 1861, Abraham Lincoln, in his inaugural address, said, and I quote, when the people shall grow weary of their constitutional rights to amend the government, they shall exert their revolutionary right to dismember and overthrow that government. He gave that speech. If Abraham Lincoln had given that speech in Lincoln Park, he would be right here on trial with us, right here in this courtroom, because that is an insightful speech. Okay, I did it in 5 minutes and 8 seconds.
Wow. That's an amazing transcript. And thank you for
It is.
Thank
And
you.
Abby Hoffman says a little more, so I encourage you to go out and get the book.
Mhm. Years ago, I met Tom Hayden, and it was when I was first involved with ICUJP, and he was doing a book on the Irish potato famine. And I talked to him about it, and he gave me some information to get in touch with his folks, and he said, "Oh, by the way, I need a $50,000 honorarium." And that's when I realized that, you know, pe people on the progressive left have a sense of humor. So we have a very interesting couple of speakers that our board member Ed Fisher brought to our attention. And Ed, are you okay with introducing them?
Yes, yes. Bill Galvin is a longtime activist with the Center on Conscience and War, and he is helping Larry Hebert, a recent objector who is in Spain right now. He's in active duty with the Air Force, but he'll have quite a bit to tell us about the current situation and why he has become an objector. So with that, I'll leave further introductions to Bill.
Anthony, when you said you're active with FCNL, I was going to say this morning as I was coming into the office, I bumped into Bridget Moix, who's the new director at FCNL. Our paths cross on occasion, and she was getting off the subway train that I was getting onto. So
Wow, Bridget is awesome.
So yeah, we were founded in 1940 because of how badly conscientious objectors have been treated during World War I. And I imagine some of you are familiar with that, but the draft law during World War I said that in order to qualify as a conscientious objector, you had to be a member of a church that prohibited its members from being participating in war, and the church had to have that as its policy before the draft law was passed. Okay, so and if you did qualify, what that meant was you were drafted into the military as a non-combatant, and you were expected to perform non-combatant military service. And for thousands of conscientious objectors, that was just not acceptable. And so if you were then conscripted into the army and refused orders, you were court-martialed. And these folks were treated horribly. We know of, I think there were 20 death sentences. Nobody was executed, okay, but some of them spent decades in jail. We know of at least 30 conscientious objectors that died because of abusive treatment that included torture. And I mean, and they described things like, you know, having a rope tied around their neck and being dragged around the floor or being thrown out of windows. And they were imprisoned at Alcatraz, and at Alcatraz, and so as you probably know, you know, prisoners, they're supposed to work. And since they were in a military prison, their work would be for the military. So these conscientious objectors refused that. And so they were literally strung up, like up on their toes. They were handcuffed or tied up in the air so that their feet were just touching the ground for 8 hours a day while everybody else was working. And then what they did, and they did this at Alcatraz, they developed these things that were called coffin cages, but it was basically a cage roughly the size of a coffin that was attached to the cell door. And so conscientious objectors would be put in these cages all day while everybody else was working. To the best of our knowledge, those cages were only used for conscientious objectors. And like I said, we know of at least 30 that died from abusive treatment. And so when the country was gearing up for World War II, some churches who were very concerned about what had happened lobbied hard to get better protection in the law for conscientious objectors. And they created the organization that I work for to be an advocate and support for conscientious objectors. And for the first time during World War II, conscientious objectors had a non-military alternative service. And they initially were working in camps. They used the old, you might be familiar, during the Depression, there was the Civilian Conservation Corps and some other government programs that put people to work. And so initially they used some of the CCC camps that were in state and national forests. And so conscientious objectors were put there. They did work like building trails, doing, you know, planting trees, fighting forest fires. And again, in World War II, I mean, conscientious objectors were willing to serve and to help people, but they were not willing to kill. And many of them actually wanted to go to Europe to provide relief to victims of the war or help rebuild. And the Congress would not allow that. Okay, so so a lot of the conscientious objectors in World War II, although many of them felt good that they had this alternative and did that, but there were others that said, this is not meaningful service. I mean, the world is, you know, going to hell right now, and we're building picnic tables. I mean, come on, we're supposed to be doing work of national importance. And so they lobbied for better work. And some of them in the western part of the US, they were smoke jumpers. They would actually parachute out of airplanes into forest fires to fight the forest fires. Some of them volunteered for medical experimentation. And so they gave conscientious objectors malaria, you know, typhoid, all sorts of different diseases. And so that they would then, the medical field would, you know, learn how to better treat folks who were, you know, malnourished and victimized by the war and sick. And that would also include starvation. There were starvation experiments where conscientious objectors were basically starved to learn how to nourish people back to health during that time period. And now the conscientious objectors who did that kind of service did volunteer for that service. But there were people who did that. I've actually met at least one of the guys who was in one of the starvation experiments. They couldn't be alone. They had to always be with somebody else to make sure they didn't eat. And one of the things he talked about was, he said, one of the things that really surprised me was the hungrier we got, the more aggressive we got. And and this was a lifelong Quaker pacifist telling me this, and so that was some of the history, and our organization was involved in helping these folks get into their alternative service placements. And probably the biggest impact of the conscientious objectors during World War II was in the field of mental health. They eventually started working in mental health hospitals and were appalled by the conditions that they encountered. And they made a pledge with each other that they would not hit the patients, which was a common practice. They would treat them with respect and dignity, and they exposed the things that they saw. They actually got the head for the state of Virginia, the entire head of mental health in Virginia. They got him fired for exposing the conditions that were going on his watch. So they made a pretty significant contribution in that way. So our organization was around back then, helping people with their conscientious objector status and to get their alternative service. After World War II, the draft, I mean, there was 1 year where there was not a draft, but a draft basically continued throughout that period. And so our organization, continued to monitor what's going on with selective service and the draft laws. And of course, there were people in the military who were becoming conscientious objectors. And at that point, there was no official policy in the military. And our organization would do what we could to help those folks, and often could help some of those folks get discharged in various ways. The military had to deal with the fact that if somebody says, look, my conscience is not going to allow me to do this, well, the military is going to have to deal with that somehow. And eventually in 1962, the Pentagon established a policy for discharging people who become conscientious objectors once they're in. And so that is something else that is actually a major thing that we continue to do now, is work with people like Larry who become conscientious objectors once they're in. We have a very good success record with the success rate with the people that work with us. We've got well over a 90% approval rate with the conscientious objectors. Well, I just yesterday got word that one of my conscientious objectors got approved. So this is an ongoing thing that we are always doing. We also continue to monitor what's going on with selective service. And and right now, just in case you might have heard some stuff about this in the news, every year there's something called the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, that Congress feels it has to pass. And since Congress is generally broken these days, it's one of the few things that is certain to pass. And so people have always put all these amendments onto it for things that they want to get passed. So what has happened at this point is that the entire House has passed a version of the NDAA that has an amendment that would automatically register people as they turn 18, based on government data banks. I mean, currently the law requires that men register as they turn 18. Lots of people are not registering. In fact, according to the most recent Selective Service annual report, I think it's 14% of the folks who are required to register do not register by the time they turn 26. Now they're required to register within a 60-day period when they turn 18. So if there's 14% that haven't done it by the time they turn 26, imagine what the percentage is of who don't do it when they're supposed to. Okay. And there are now over 40 states that have laws that in certain ways coerce people to register. The most common thing these days is linked to getting a driver's license. And in fact, California, that's something that just got defeated. That was proposed in the California legislature, but just got defeated in California. But but a lot of states require that you be registered for the draft to get a driver's license. And then there are some states that require that to get financial aid for college or even admission to a state college. And you can't get a federal job if you haven't registered. And there are even some states that have those kind of laws. And so according to the Selective Service's own annual report, about 2/3 of the people who did register, so you already have 14% who are not registering, 2/3 of those who did register did so because they were coerced by one of these laws. So it's clearly an unpopular law. So now Congress, the House has passed a version of the NDAA that would automatically register people as they turn 18 based on government data banks. The Senate has not yet dealt with the NDAA, but the Senate Armed Services Committee has reported out a version of it that has not yet gone to the full floor. And the Senate version also includes the automatic registration. So it's, that has been approved so far by the Senate committee, and also would expand draft registration to women. That's the Senate version. Now, there has also been an amendment introduced in the Senate that would repeal the Selective Service Act. Okay, so we don't know yet what's going to happen in the Senate, but the way it works is if those two bills are not identical, and they won't be because the House and Senate are different, then it goes to conference committee, and in conference committee they'll work out the differences and basically report out a bill that either gets voted up or down. And so that's where things stand with Selective Service right now. But in the meantime, we get calls from folks who are approaching draft registration age, who are people of conscience, who want to make a statement, get on record, so that if the draft does resume, they got a step ahead for getting conscientious objector status. So those are, some of the major things that we're working on now. And you also wanted me to talk about how I got into this. And so, well, I mentioned earlier I was a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War. Once I figured out I was a conscientious objector, I went to the Quaker who taught at my college for draft counseling, and he pulled out a book called Words of Conscience, put out by this group called NISBCO, the National Interreligious Service Board for Conscientious Objectors, and it basically had, and I'm Presbyterian, so we were able to look up to see what the Presbyterian Church said about supporting conscientious objectors. I was at that point planning to be a minister, and I went to seminary after college, and I got an opportunity. The Presbyterian Church back then had an office called the Emergency Ministry on Conscience and War. It was a special office set up to deal with what was going on during Vietnam, and I got an internship with that office, and it just clicked, and it just seemed like the right thing, and I realized this is what I'm really called to do. And so, and that's when I first met, got to come to the office of NISBCO, which is now the Center on Conscience and War, got to meet those people and work with them, and it's been pretty much my life ever since. I mean, I worked for CCCO for 14 years. CCCO is the Central Committee for Conscientious Objectors. It is no more, but I worked there for 14 years, and I've been on the staff here since 2000. But I've been involved with the board or council of this organization since the 70s. And this is really, it's my life. This is what I'm committed to. I'm also really active with the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, and and of course got to meet Larry when he was here in DC doing his witness. And maybe I should shut up now and let Larry do some talking.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start really. I mean, my I guess journey to being a conscientious objector was due to the images that were coming out of Gaza like really early on. And I didn't realize kind of what was like. Obviously I'm in the military. I'm avionics, so I'm helping push the cargo that's coming through here in Spain, where I was. And I didn't really kind of understand what I was seeing. The cargo that comes through is military equipment, vehicles, weapons, and for someone who doesn't really have like a background and like an understanding of what they're seeing, you just kind of like assume that it's being put to good use. But after October 7th and seeing just the sheer amount of war crimes and inhumane treatment of civilians, I started to like kind of connect the dots and realize that my job was participating in the occupation, genocide, and inhumane treatment of Palestinians. So that kind of set the framework going forward. And I reached out to the GI Rights Hotline back in, I believe, November. And I actually was in touch with the Quaker House first. And they sent me the information to show me what a conscientious objector is and how I would, I guess, fit that narrative. And I didn't think that I would qualify as a conscientious objector just because they said you have to be against all war. And I didn't have any knowledge of really any war. I was just serving in the military. So that I pushed that off for a while. And then in February, Aaron Bushnell, fellow active duty airman, he went to DC and he self-immolated in front of the Israeli embassy. And then that kind of got me going again. It got me like invested on like, I need to do something. And I had waited to see what the response was going to be after his self-immolation, and nobody really spoke about it within leadership. I was expecting like a commander's call or something from our chief or someone higher up from them, and that never came. Nobody spoke his name except for within group chats and like at the lowest levels. And after 2 weeks, I realized that they just were just not going to speak on it at all. They were just not going to bring up Aaron. They were not going to acknowledge that there's wider support for putting an end to this genocide than what they realized. And they just didn't want to acknowledge that. So I decided that I would travel out to DC. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew that I had to go there. That's where Congress is. That's where the commander-in-chief is. That's the big boss for me. So I went to DC. I met up with Code Pink. While I was with Code Pink and Medea Benjamin and Ann Wright, I got back in touch with the GI Rights Hotline, eventually the Center on Conscience and War, and I met with Veterans for Peace, and all those connections kind of helped me figure out like where I needed to go from there. And then I eventually figured out that, or came to the conclusion that trying to talk to congressmen was not going to be beneficial, because that's what I was trying to do with Code Pink. And they're obviously media trained and ready to dismiss anyone that comes up to them. So I eventually decided that the best way to get some more recognition for Aaron Bushnell and for the genocide was to do a hunger strike in front of the White House. And so I did that for about 9 days. And on the 9th day, I made the wise decision to try to talk to the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And he did not appreciate that. So he sent a letter to my command, and was liaison officer sent a letter. And basically, they were inflating what the situation was. They said that I was being disrespectful and rude to him, and obviously I wasn't. It's on video. But so they recalled my leave because of that. And I got back to my command in Spain, and they issued a letter of reprimand after about 2 months. And now I'm kind of back in Spain, just stuck and waiting to get out. I submitted my CO application, and I'm waiting for that to be approved, but that is a long process so far. So, yeah.
So what part of Spain are you in, actually?
I'm in Rota, Spain. It's an hour and a half south of Sevilla, which is like the biggest city around here.
Yeah. It's amazing how we have bases, a lot of places, and a lot of them where you wouldn't exactly expect. So, thank you both for the information. We have a couple hands up. So, Steve has his hand up.
Well, I just want to say to thank Bill, not just for that extraordinary examination but for everything you do every day to lift up the rights of people of conscience. And we're seeing one right here with Larry. I'm so moved by your story so far. We've had people on this program. I don't know if you were on when I said we've been at this for 23 years. ICUJP was founded in the wake of 9/11 by Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Quakers, humanists, understanding that religious communities must stop blessing war and violence. And we've been at that for this whole time. And every so often, we get beyond the platitudes and the important policy issues and meet a person of conscience. And we're so grateful, Larry, that you're here with us and the struggle you're going through. I have a couple questions, but I may try to get back in line so that I can let other people ask theirs. But I want to try to understand. You're a young man. You see military service as a place to serve and as a suitable occupation. And I'm, trust me, every word I speak is in good faith and with if we were in person, I'd already have given you a warm hug. But given your level of insight, your first phrase was that you assumed the weapons were being put to good use. And that just stopped me cold, and I wrote it in my notes. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the baseline, that you must have come to the point that you could, did you know those weapons were going to Israel and into Gaza or elsewhere around the world? And you, it sounds like there's been almost a transformation in your identity and in your thinking, that you go from a young man who thinks weapons have a good use. Maybe that's defensive weapons or something in that nature. But I'll stop, and I think you get the essence. And then you've come, and you obviously paid attention. Somewhere you got the news of genocide and occupation. Were you politically active before you entered the service and during your service? So that's the cluster of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. It's actually one of the better questions I've gotten, so I appreciate that. I think a lot of people fall into this when you're growing up in the United States. I mean, when you're growing up anywhere, really, you get propagandized to believe that your country is the greatest or whatever, whether you're in China or Russia or wherever. I was susceptible to that, and so were my family members, to believe that America was this great country, and kind of like idolizing us to the point where like we are the good guy and like there are bad guys and that we are doing what is good. The world is obviously way more complex than that. We are not the superhero or the main character in this story. And I had to really, think through that and work through that, like you were saying. And yeah, I think ultimately what got me to start reflecting on that was, I mean, I didn't really have too much involvement in politics prior to joining, but when I did join, I think what kind of got me more interested was COVID, because we were all locked in our houses. I didn't really think that politics was ever going to have like this much of a role in my own personal life. And so I started paying attention a lot more of what politicians were saying and how they interact between parties. And I found it to be really disgusting, this whole game of politics and how they play it. And just kind of them like stoking the fire in everybody on both sides. So that ultimately got me to how, like, I guess, grow a lot of distrust for politicians. And then October 7th, after that, seeing the actual like video footage of the result of our foreign policy and our weapons, knowing that I'm wearing a uniform that says United States Air Force, and that same like country is putting their name on these bombs that are killing these civilians. That really gave me this deep wake up call, and I knew immediately from the first video that I couldn't support this, that I was eventually going to have to get out regardless. I didn't know about Conscientious Objector at that point, but I knew I was going to get out. And there was one other thing I was going to say. But yeah, I think, after, seeing that footage, I had just had a child 2 months prior to that. And so seeing children in that look just like my own, I have two children, that resonated with me as well. And then from there, I tried to get like a deeper understanding of like, okay, well, why is this happening to them? And why is this not being stopped? And so, yeah, and that was kind of the beginning of my beliefs to be a conscientious objector. and be ultimately just anti-war.
Larry, just as a quick follow-up, and then we'll go to Bill and the others. You're going to learn, and Bill and others know that we are an activist organization. This is not a pleasant Friday morning conversation for us. So I think you are emblematic of a lot of people of conscience. And ICUJP is going to stay close in touch with you. Do you have legal counsel at this point?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. This program's being recorded. I'm a retired civil rights lawyer of almost 50 years. So you have the right to remain silent. I do. I mean, now I'm serious. You have to think about your goals and you have to think about where you're headed. But I think you have an important story. You are in the grip of this, and that's why I'm saying ICUJP will stay in touch with you, because I think cases like yours need public support. In this case, they will need interfaith support. So I think this is a very important moment for us. And the second hand that's up is Robert Corsini, who is a prominent documentary filmmaker. And I'm going to anticipate, Robert may have raised his hand. He has been all over the world producing documentaries, interviewing people in the midst of their struggles. And I think in the right setting, before you get buried in the bureaucracy of the military-industrial complex, you need to be surrounded with support and love and visibility, so that we don't open the newspaper and learn that Larry Hebert has disappeared. So thank you for everything, and we'll go back to the other. I think Bill wanted to chime in as our speaker.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. One is when Larry talked about, I know what I object to what I'm seeing. I never thought about all war before. That's a pretty common thing for folks in the military who become conscientious objectors. They know that what they are seeing, what they are doing, what they're a part of is wrong, but they never thought about whether all war is wrong. But that becomes, a jumping off point for them to then start thinking about, well, are there wars that might be okay? So that's one thing I wanted to say. That's a pretty common experience. The other is people who become conscientious objectors in the military, they have to show how their beliefs have changed since they joined. Obviously, if they felt this way, they wouldn't have joined. And actually, one of the questions you are asked as part of the recruitment process is, are you a conscientious objector? And if you say yes, then you can't join. So everyone who's in the military has answered no to that question, even though most of them don't ever remember being asked, or if they were asked, they had no idea what it meant.
That's it's interesting how they set that up. Yeah. I should also say that the reason that I am the communications person for the group is that Steve and I agreed that I can have him on retainer. So that's why I'm doing this. Robert, you had your hand up. You're on mute right now. There you
go. Phil was actually first.
Okay.
Phil was next.
Sorry about that. Phil, please.
So I'm on. Okay. Anyway, Larry, I am just fascinated and taken by your story. And I would be extremely interested in learning what your outcome is when you have an outcome. It sounds like a monumental struggle. As I had mentioned in my introduction, that I grew up in a hotbed of conscientious objectors. Most of my parents' friends and all of my peers in the friends meeting were COs. Okay. Some one guy fled to Canada, and then later um, I what I'm trying to say that people were trying to get out of the military after they had enlisted, and it was in what we usually call a non-war situation. It was like pre-Vietnam. Uh, my longtime friend and roommate, who grew up in a military family, but his sister was a Quaker, and he hung out with me and went to Quaker meetings. Uh, and when it was time to get drafted, he didn't know what the hell to do. And once he got in boot camp, he says, "Hell, what am I doing?" And he applied for conscientious objector status, got a little break time, and got out okay. But some of the conflicts are really complex. Myself, I came within an inch of being a non-registrant. When I was 17 and having to register for the draft, I just went into a tailspin. And for some reason, because my family didn't talk about emotions, I never thought to talk to them about it. And so I ended up just building anger at the system. And I so angry I kicked in a wall of one of the outbuildings. Mom thought I either had anger management or feelings I needed to talk about or something. But uh and one thing that was very significant in my growing up was that we had members of the Friends meeting who were non-registrants and went to prison. Uh, and one of these guys was a very close friend, and he ended up living on our kind of our communal property. But he discovered when he was in prison as a non-registrant that he had some good company. And some of that good company turned out to be Mennonites, and some of them turned out to be Hopi Indians. And this is a very little known thing, is that the Hopi tribe is a pacifist tribe. And they didn't believe the U.S. had any jurisdiction over them. and and so that started a kind of a long-term relationship between the Quakers and the Hopis that was very personal in the sense that my dad would take groups of young people out to the Hopi reservation and introduce them to Hopi history and philosophy. Anyway, so that was very significant. One of the things that was also very impressive to me, I just within a few years ago, I met a guy who was um, a fighter pilot in Vietnam, and it got to him, and he just quit. Said, "I can't do this anymore," and applied for CO status. And that again, that you generally happens. There's a little break time, and eventually get out. Uh, and this particular guy um, went to medical school after that, and went to El Salvador and served uh, the revolutionaries behind the lines under a pseudonym, and uh, and went on to be a strong advocate for the El Salvador situation, and eventually wound up being the executive director of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. I was a Unitarian for a while. Anyway, I think one of the touch points here is that during the Vietnam War, all kinds of people from non-religious backgrounds or non-supportive religious backgrounds were applying for CO status. And I had, personal friends who were not non-Quakers trying to get CO status. And the Friends meeting here set up a draft counseling service that was open to anybody. Didn't have to be a Quaker. And just one kind of comment, Steve mentioned that he was denied CO status because he couldn't say yes to the supreme being question. And I struggled with that, but when I learned that when I was going through this, that the Quakers anticipated that many people would have trouble with that question. And so they would give you guidelines on how you could answer that question, but with an essay without a simple affirmative answer. In other words, bypass the question with a statement. And I did that. For some people who do not know, Quakers are also a hotbed for atheists. Of which I am also one. Anyway, so I'm a highly religious Quaker and an atheist. Anyway, but anyway, I'll stop there. I've probably talked too much, but anyway, I just really appreciate what you guys are doing. Appreciate what you're going through, and keep us posted, please.
That's great, Phil. Thank you. Robert, I want to come back to
Yeah,
you.
no, thanks. I don't know how to follow that up, Phil. That was fantastic. Thanks for a moment of levity in all of this. Larry, I want to thank you for your courage, because courage really is the service we need from people. Not this militarized distortion of what is real and what isn't. I had heard about your story, and I kind of all of a sudden I realized just how serious this conversation was, as you delineated everything. And all of a sudden I've been multitasking a few things, and I'm like, holy crap. So again, what you're going through is astonishing. It's lifelong, life-changing for you, for sure, and it will guide the rest of your life. So again, that takes some enormous courage to make those kinds of decisions. I wanted to ask you, in your experience in the military, in the Air Force, did you get a sense, what was your sense of the awareness of what the implications are of the actions going on amongst your other colleagues in the military? How many people actually had thoughts of empathy on the other side of the destinations for these weapons?
Yeah, so it's a weird time to be in the military. When October 7th happened, nobody really said anything. I think everybody was just kind of waiting around to see how we would be mobilized and how it would affect ops. And eventually, as time, dragged on, I was expecting somebody to say something. I wasn't actually at work until the end of October because I was on parental leave, with my child. So when I got back, I was expecting something, and pretty much no one was actually talking about Gaza or even Israel or anything. I think a lot of people try to separate politics and world events and everything with what their job is in the military. I think a lot of people try to look at it purely as just another job, but it's not. And so it was actually funny, like about a month ago, we were doing what's it called? An Ask Me Anything, an AMA, where leadership within the unit sits in front of whoever's on shift. So there's like 40 or 50 of us, and the floor is open, and they can just ask the leadership anything. And one of the pre-written questions was, why do people try to force politics into our jobs? Why can't we just do our jobs and not be involved in politics? And the job is strictly political, like in every way. So it's kind of weird that people have that idea and that framework. But I think to an extent, I may have kind of been in that boat before, where I didn't think that my job was really doing any harm. Like, I'm just an aircraft mechanic. I don't have a rifle, and I'm not trained on weapons. And so, I think a lot of people might have that same thought, that they just aren't, like, their position is not impactful enough to make a difference, whether they stay in or they leave. I think some people even think that if they leave, someone will replace them always. So, but it is also coming at a weird time too, because the military has been very public about how much it's bleeding. Recruiting is way down. Retention rates are way down. They lowered the ASVAB requirement to 10 last I heard. And when I joined it, I think it was like 40. So they're taking pretty much anybody that takes the test, and they're increasing pay, they're increasing certain benefits. They're trying so hard to retain the people that are in, because people are just not staying in, and people are getting out, whether it's through CO or not. Like, people are getting out, and it's a weird time. And since I got back from my hunger strike in DC, I did notice that there is like two, very distinguished groups of people that interact with me. There's a surprising amount of people that do support what I did, what I'm standing for Gaza, and they have been vocal with me. I wasn't expecting, more than 3 people to come up to me, and I was surprised there was like a dozen people. So that was good news from me. And I've heard through mutuals that there's a lot of other people too, and they're just not going public. They're just not there's a large group that I've heard that have, families. Like, the Air Force is their primary source of income, and it's their safety net. And so that is ultimately the deciding factor for them to stay in and not go public, or say anything. This is their livelihood, and they don't want to give that up. And to an extent, I kind of understand that you have to take care of your family, but I also have a family, and I'm not willing to do something and be a part of something that is killing or hurting someone else, just for me to be able to provide for my family. I can go find a mediocre job and figure it out. So that's my opinion on that crowd. I don't think most of our people are bad people. I just think they're misinformed, and they really are bought into the propaganda. But I haven't met anyone in the ranks that is like that swears by Israel and loves Israel. There's I haven't met a Zionist. So it's a weird time for sure.
Wow. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
I mean, I could go on, but there are many others here wanting to talk.
Yeah, that's some great information. And it's insightful into what you're dealing with. So it's good. One of people that presented to us a few weeks ago, Bob Zaw, who is a war resistor, has his hand up. And Bob, please.
I couldn't get in to the meeting on time, so I missed a lot of what you had to say, but I get the gist of it. So here's what I'm offering to you. You know, I speak in colleges about the war in Vietnam, and one of the people that I've brought in with me, his name is John Kent, and he went to the Naval Academy, which is the West Point, but the Navy, and he became a jet fighter pilot, and then he refused to fly in Vietnam. So he's done exactly what you have done. He didn't go on a hunger strike, but he refused to fly. And so he now speaks with me at Loyola Marymount. And I've already sent him an email. He has cancer and is going through chemotherapy. He can't meet in person, but he will meet with you. And what he did back then was when David Harris, the leader of the resistance, got out of prison, John Kent was refusing to fly, and he was trying to stop the Constellation battleship aircraft carrier from going back to Vietnam. So, as an act of constituency, David Harris brought what he'd learned in the Mississippi voting rights campaign, and they set up with the resistance a referendum where people could vote in San Diego about keeping the Constellation at home. And 80% of the votes, and it was 70,000 people voted, were to keep the Connie at home. It didn't stay at home, but that's the action we took. He's gone through what you've gone through, at least some of it, and he's willing to connect with you. So if Rick could put us together, you know, I can get you John Kent's email and so on, and you can connect directly. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
I'll email you both right after this to get you together. That's great. And thank you very much, Bob. Let's see, Dave, did you want to jump in?
Thank you. Thanks, Rick. I have three or four quick questions. Number one, are you legally AWOL? Number two, are you separated right now from your family? And do you face brig time or prison time?
I am not AWOL. This last week, I've actually been in TAP, which is a transition assistance program to help military members transition out of the military, or really get them ready to join the civilian sector. So I'm still in. I'll be going back to work on Monday in uniform. I'm not doing my job. They pulled me from my primary duties. They just kind of have me doing just random work right now to keep me busy throughout the day and make sure I'm not doing any other hunger strikes. And then I am not going to prison as far as I know. I did get a letter of reprimand for disrespecting the chief of staff, as they put it, which I did not really contest. And then I'm still technically under investigation for my hunger strike and the interviews that I've been doing. So whatever that amounts to, I'm not exactly sure, but I've been reviewing Air Force instruction, and I haven't really found anything that I've done that was illegal. They could potentially try to do like a dissemination charge, I guess, for saying that I supported Israel, but our politicians say it every day, so I don't know why I can't say it. So yeah. And then you had another question too, I can't remember.
Yes, but first I want to say thank you
Of
for not thank you for your service, but thank you for your service to humanity and to us. My other question, and you don't answer it if it's too personal. I wondered if you have been if you're separated from your family at this time due to the situation that you are in right now.
No, I'm actually, they're in the other room. I actually have these, I blur my background because of these, but it's my son's first birthday today, so we're celebrating that.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Very nice. Carol Francis, you had a question, I believe.
Yeah, I wanted to say, as an activist for Palestine, we really, 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 really appreciate you. And both of you. But Larry, I'm wondering, I was really struck by your saying about that question that comes up about why are they trying to politicize my job. It just really blows me away that you're working for the military and people want to know why it's politicized. Anybody would politicize it. And I was really happy to know that you came back to about 4 times as many supporters than you expected, and that there are no Zionists. Do you get any flack from fellows in the military for any reason, like, how dare you criticize my country or embarrass my country like that? And also, are you connected with any of the organizations that do, I mean, obviously you're connected with this, with the people here, but like, do you know of organizations that you can work with and support and get support from once this ordeal is over?
Yeah, I haven't, nobody's been combative towards me. I know there's people that disagree with my views, but it's not like public to me. So again, bringing up, there is a group that is supportive, but the vast majority of people just kind of separate themselves. They don't get involved at all. They just kind of ignore my existence because, again, they just want to do their job. They don't want to jeopardize their position, and they don't want to get in trouble, I guess. So that's what the majority of people do. And some of those people, I can't speak for them, right? So I don't know if they are supportive, and I don't know if they are against those beliefs. But I think the vast majority of people that I had conversations with have been able to understand where I'm coming from. I have this one individual in the unit that I speak to fairly often, and he's a genuinely nice person, and he is pro-war. He loves America. He's America first, and me and him talk all the time about war and politics, and he tells me all the time, he's like, Larry, I am brainwashed. I'm going to admit to you, I already know I am brainwashed. I love America, and I'll never not love America, and it's always going to be America first. And that's just his position. And it is interesting too, because he, and I don't want to, I guess throw my family under the bus, but there's someone in my family that is essentially the same way. And it's interesting to see their perspective because their what is it? Their empathy only extends to American things or people. It doesn't extend beyond these borders. And that's where we butt heads and we separate in values. I don't see an American life valued more than a Palestinian life or a child in Vietnam or anywhere. So I think all life is equal, and to really kind of bring this into today, people have been on both sides have been condemning the assassination attempt on Trump. I personally don't. He supports killing Palestinians in Gaza. So why would I, if he values Palestinians like that, why would I value him anymore? Like, that's just kind of my moral framework. I don't see how you can feel empathy for someone who doesn't feel empathy for others. And yeah, so that's where I'm at for that.
That's always been a hard one for me too. I know we have some people who have their hands up again, and we are maybe about 10 or 15 minutes away from our closing section of the call. But Bill, I wanted to ask you something because I've been curious. When I was in college, I went to Chapman College out here in Orange County, and this was in '80 where Carter had started the selective service draft again, right? So we had to register and stuff. And I remember talking to my counselor, about things like I should be talking to a therapist, take those notes, keep them, send them to yourself in registered mail so you can have those to show a draft board and I wanted to see, it seemed like at that point, even though we did not have things like the internet or, you know, anything like that, it seemed like that movement was a bit more centralized and a bit more cohesive than it is right now. And I wanted to see maybe if you feel the same way, or is it just because I'm so far removed from it, I'm not going to get drafted anyway. So,
Well, first of all, it was 1980 when the registration started. So
yeah.
when it started, it's big news and everybody's paying attention. I mean, so that was a part of it, because it was, and also in those first, at the very beginning, there was like a period of a week or two where everybody had to register. And that was also true the following January. Whereas after that, people had to register as they turned 18. So there was no longer a massive, this week we're registering people, which was allowed folks to then organize and be at the post offices and, and raise things. Whereas once it's an ongoing trickling thing, it doesn't have the same kind of cohesive, power in a sense. So I think that's a big part of it. I mean, I think the non-registration, I mean, to be honest, a lot of folks aren't even just really aren't even paying attention to it. They get registered because they want to get a driver's license or something like that, and never really. And we still on occasion get calls from people who say, "I just got a registration acknowledgement from Selective Service and I didn't register." Well, turns out that they did when they applied for their license or something like that. They just never even realized it. So I think that's the difference. I mean, I think I don't know what the automatic registration is going to do, but if Congress expands it to women, I think we're going to see some very specific organized opposition at that point.
Yep. And I appreciate that. I put the link to the Center for the Center for Conscience and War in the chat, and also interesting article about what conservatives are planning for military entrance under Project 2025. So something interesting to take a look at. So we essentially have 6 hands up, about 10-15 minutes, so we can keep it extremely short. Ruby, you had something you wanted to ask.
I just commend you too, Larry, and I'm happy to hear you and your family, your home, and you too. Excuse me, Bill, because I was an Army brat, well, Air Force, Army, so I understand military pretty well, and have been working, in the school system, and kind of wondered what was happening with the people of your age now, because there's so many of them think that their vote doesn't count, or people have come in, and even though my physical body right now has put me in this place, I'm able to see and work with other people right here where I am and finding their direction. And it's really important. And Bill, my mother was a musician, so I got that side. And the way I got the military side was because she saw that I wasn't going in the way she wanted me to. So she put me with my godmother, my great aunt, who was with the military. And it's really important what you're talking about, which is the future and the earth coming together. And everybody's talking about who they don't want and what they don't want, but they're not putting in the energy of what is needed now to support this world that we have coming together, and this earth, and who it is, and what we want out of the people that we elect. These are the important things. So I'm happy to see you together at your age with your family and coming together and standing on where you are. Do it. And you, Larry, the music, don't forget the music, okay? Add it to, I'm sorry, Bill, don't forget the music and add it to what you're doing too. Okay, and I pass.
Thank you very much. So where are we at here? We have about 5 hands up. I'm going to ask for people to make very short comments, starting with Phil.
Okay, thank you. I've had one question that kind of been burning in me. I think my answer was short, but my question is short, but the answer might be way beyond our capabilities here. I have recently been learning that there are Israeli military who are trying to get out for moral reasons. I don't know what's happening to them. There is no conscientious objector option in the Israeli military. So if anybody knows anything about that, I'd be interested in hearing, but it might be something that I'll have to research on my own.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Conscientious objectors in Israel go to jail, and often for a short time, usually 30, 40 days, but then they're expected to report and serve after that. And if they refuse, they go back to jail. And this continues for quite a while till eventually Israel leaves them alone. And there is War Resisters International and the International FOR are in Europe are monitoring what's going on with Israeli COs, Ukrainian COs, and Russians, and lots of folks.
You're back on mute, Phil, but I am going to exercise the facilitator option here, and maybe if we have time to come back to you.
Am I next?
Yep.
So the most important question, Larry, what's the name of your 1-year-old son?
Kaiden.
Say it again.
Kaiden.
How do you spell it?
Kaidon. He's named after my brother, Caden.
I'm so impressed for so many reasons, but that you're with us today on his birthday. You just said words that are so close to our founding convener, George Regas, who, facing the Iraq War in 2004, told his parishioners in a imagined speech from Jesus to George Bush and John Kerry that I will tell you what I think of your war. The sin at the heart of this war against Iraq is your belief that an American life is of more value than an Iraqi life, that an American child is more precious than an Iraqi baby. That is our founder. He was investigated by the IRS for giving that sermon. His church's religious status was questioned. He survived that. But you speak such truth in connection with our organization. And finally, I want to tell you that you are on the right side of history, because this morning, the International Court of Justice, the judicial arm of the United Nations, found that the occupation in the West Bank of Israel is illegal under international law. That is where the world goes, and you are on the right side of history, Larry.
Appreciate it.
Dave, you had a quick comment.
Yes, quickly. In your opinion, Bill, and Larry as well, do the Palestinian people have the right to resist the occupation and their oppression by force of arms? Can they, in your moral framework, are they allowed to do that? Thank you.
I'll let Bill go first.
Okay, well, I'm a pacifist, so I do not believe violence is ever justified for any reason. But I do think nonviolent resistance is absolutely essential, and I also believe it's more effective, and more likely to get results.
Yeah, and I don't see why anyone wouldn't agree with that. I find it hypocritical that anyone in the West would ever say anything against that. If they were occupied, if they were facing the exact same situation, they would do something worse than what we saw on October 7th, hands down.
Yeah, very true.
Yes, Larry, you mentioned a transition program for objectors. That is something I believe is relatively new, and I am hopeful that it represents a new recognition, if not respect, for objectors within the military. And I wonder if you or Bill could tell us a little bit more about that program.
The TAP program is for all military members that are getting out of service and transitioning into the civilian sector, to prepare them for everything, because the military provides essentially all your needs, from housing to your just basic pay and medical and all that. So the whole program is just setting you up to make sure that you don't end up homeless, and that you have a job and you have at least a resume to submit. So
Well, I think
it's a good program.
Those objectors a generation ago had nothing like that. Very little recognition and a lot of opposition within their command.
Yep.
I've heard stories of objectors who submitted paperwork and were told the paperwork was lost. They would have to submit it again, and that's just one example of the resistance and obstruction that objectors faced not very long ago. So you're fortunate to have that kind of support, and I commend you for your determination. And
Thank you.
I hope the best for you.
Lucy, were you able to unmute?
I think so. You can hear me now?
Yep, got
Yes.
it.
I just wanted to quickly say it so happened that I had my car towed this weekend, and the Iranian tow truck driver who towed my car was giving me a sermon, you might say, on how great my country is. So Larry's relative, I think, is all right. You don't have to worry about being brainwashed. I think America is still a great country, which is pretty clear from the history of World War I to now, where Larry has a path out of the military. I did want to say that this Iranian tow truck driver was forced to leave because there was no option for him but the military. And he spent 3 years in Turkey, and now he's in America and is extolling our country to the hilt. So thank you for letting me comment.
No worries. Robert, you had your hand up.
So I just want to remind all of us of the words of General Smedley Butler after World War I, commenting on war is a racket, saw everything as it was. I think it still is, and it speaks to all the horrible games that are being played right now. I was curious what you thought. The weapons you're transporting or moving could just as easily be going to Kyiv as Tel Aviv. So did you have what's your sense about what that war effort is bringing forth right now?
Yeah, when that invasion broke out, I was already kind of following that the underhanded tactics of the pipeline bombing, and kind of the things that were leading up to it. And so I got a little bit into the Ukrainian war with Russia, and I didn't see a lot of footage coming out from it. So its actual impact on me morally wasn't anything. I thought it was just, oh, well, this is what happens, right? But yeah, I didn't see any images coming out. I didn't kind of have any moral connection to it. I just thought that this was a normal process for us, and that this was going to be something going forward for years. And yeah, now obviously I have a completely different stance on it. And I don't need to see the images that are even coming out to kind of have that foundation.
Yeah, another quick thing I want to ask you. You made a reference to someone commenting to you about Trump's assassination. Could you clarify what you said about that you didn't feel empathy or sorry, or you didn't feel sorry for him? Was that what you said, actually?
Yeah, I didn't feel anything. I didn't have any empathy when I heard what happened to Trump, just because I know what he said about Palestinians, and he's been very supportive of Israel and their genocide of innocent civilians. So I can't have any empathy for someone like that. It's not in my moral boundaries.
No, I totally get it. Would you feel the same about Biden?
No. I mean, he's the one actually supporting it right now. So, and I can say that maybe, I guess, as someone in the military, he's still currently my boss, but yeah, I wouldn't have any sympathy for that.
I think what you said is that it's hard for you to find empathy with a person that's not empathetic, and that resonated for me very well.
Well, no, absolutely. And the fact that he used Palestinians as a slur in all of his rhetoric is just beyond. I mean, you can only imagine where he'll drive the train once he's in charge, or if he is, hopefully not.
We have one more question. Carol Francis, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Bill, are you aware of and have you been supporting Palestinian unarmed nonviolent resistance that's gone on since before 1948, particularly the years of international solidarity movement that I was involved in. I went there to support Palestinian non-violent resistance a year after Rachel Corrie was killed with the same organization. And it seems to me that you can sit here and say nonviolent struggle is more powerful, but if the world refuses to acknowledge it, and even peace activists refuse to support it because they're scared of being called anti-Semitic or for whatever reason, then it's really hard to defend the idea that, you know, they should always be nonviolent when they're always ignored or shot or beaten when they're being nonviolent.
Okay. I am aware of the nonviolent resistance among Palestinians, and I have been supportive of it. And I do understand the point you're making. And I would say that violent struggles don't seem to work either right now, looking at, I mean, clearly what Israel is doing is completely wrong, but it was precipitated by what Hamas did, from what I can see, violence always leads to more violence and destruction and death. And if you look at some of the studies done by like Erica Chenoweth or Gene Sharp, studying nonviolent revolutions and struggles over the past 100 years, and they have found, by their own research, they have found that the nonviolent struggles have been more effective in terms of bringing about real change than violent ones.
But when they're ignored, what happens?
Well, that's the problem. The problem is people ignore it. I mean,
I think that's organizing, though. If you read A Force More Powerful by Anderson and Duvall, I mean, everything from solidarity to the Salt March to things like that were planned and were focused and were adhered to, and maybe that's the thing, is that we're not as organized as people who want to suppress and stuff like that. It could be just an issue of efficiency to a certain extent. Steve, do you have one? I know you usually want to say something at the end.
Well, you read my mind. I want to we're going to have a closing circle. We're going to bring into that circle people we care about, and then we're going to have a closing prayer if Doc Ruby has sound and is ready to give us some closing words to send us off for the week ahead. My piece now is to thank Rick for ably facilitating and for Rebecca's beautiful reflection. But Bill and Larry, you are now card-carrying members of ICUJP. Your card is valid and in good order. We welcome you back to these Friday morning sessions on a whole range of topics that I think would interest you both. And we are so grateful that each one of you wakes up every morning, that you are men of conscience and people of conscience. And we wish Caden a wonderful, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thanks.
As we used to do physically at Emmanuel Presbyterian Church, kind of cyber join hands. It's not AI because we're all real people, as far as I know. And you join hands and reflect on people that we would like to raise up, things that we would like to talk about, people that are that can maybe use a focus of goodwill.
Let's begin with your family, Rick. How is your mother?
She's very good. She's at home. feisty as ever. She got into a little gang of other ladies at the skilled nursing facility, and she's still talking to them and stuff. So she's doing great. As far as the community with all these feisty old ladies, I have no idea. But thank you. If I can, I would like to also remember somebody who was very influential when I picked up one of their records and had me think about absurdity in the most amazing way. And that's the late Bob Newhart, who passed away this week. I had a very fortuitous chance to meet him when I was working in Westwood. He was just crossing the street. And it was, I mean, he was in his late 80s at the time. I said, I love you. You're great. And he thank you. Who the hell are you? The guy was still as sharp as ever. So it was a very nice encounter.
Hey everyone, this is Hidab, and
Ah.
I apologize for joining late. I just had a meeting and I just jumped on this one before my next meeting, which I told him I wasn't going to join. I appreciate the opportunity, but I'd like to honor my Uncle Mo. He passed away on July 5th in Florida. And unfortunately, I was on my way to go see him, and I couldn't, unfortunately. He was the most loving, the most kind, and he was the reason why I am here in the United States.
Hadab, I'm exercising chair privilege here. You will see a recording of this session, and you will meet Larry Hebert, an active duty member of the American military who was on a hunger strike because of the genocide in Gaza and is now seeking conscientious objector and separation from the military due to his deep conscience and opposition to supporting war in this case. So the idea that we are privileged on the same screen to have you both, Larry Hadab we have stood with her in solidarity when she spoke to us months ago. In her close and extended family had lost over 100 people. The number is larger than that in Gaza, where she was born and grew up. So we are seeing two people of conscience today. That's what ICUJP does in bringing people together. And we're going to continue this work together.
God bless you. God bless you, Larry, and thank you, Steve, for making the introduction and the connection. And I'm looking forward to hearing the recording, Larry, and a pleasure to meet you virtually. Hopefully our paths will cross in person.
Pleasure is mine. God bless.
Yeah, I just want to express my gratitude to Larry. It's wonderful to see a young man of conscience with such courage. I'd like to lift up the family of Sue Settlage. She's a prominent Quaker who is very active with the Friends Committee on National Legislation. She passed away this past week, and there have been memorial service this morning. Also, I've been speaking with Sonia Tuma, who is the regional director of the American Friends Service Committee, and she's a caregiver for her brother who has stage 4 lung cancer. And I'd like you to hold Sonia in your prayers as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you speak to her again, please give her our good thoughts, Ruby, if you're ready to send us off, that would be great.
Yeah, this has been wonderful work here. We have the senior and we have one who is in the center. Just coming into what has happened here. And we know that Hadi and her family are truly accepting the blessings of Uncle Mo. in the invisible. So I know as we all come together in the truths that we've heard, that we see the peace within ourselves to go forward as we become clear on our divine purpose and are capable to plan and go forward with it. I'm grateful for the continued work of the ICUJP, the Palestinian work, and that wonderful, wonderful artwork that was done that can be sent out. And as I know and accept all these things, I give it all to that divine in thanksgiving and prayer. Ashe, amen, hallelujah.
Amen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bill, for your vision and the work you do every day. Thank you, Larry, and thanks to everybody else. Be safe. Come back. Join us whenever you can. Yes, Larry, my heart goes to you as well. Thank you, everyone.